And but like this is at last the last woman response to her readers and critics by Eileen M. Hunt, and this is in the History of European Ideas. As always, my first time reading. I am not endorsing this work, but let me know if you have any questions. I will do my best to explain it, and then we review it at the end. So here we go. Yeah, so I guess this is like, maybe this is maybe they were talking about, I don't know what this is, but like, yeah, the first, like, there's a little headline up here: the first man, Mary Shelley, in the post-apocalyptic imagination. I don't know. Unreal says philosophers put their heart and soul into work. We trash it like trollish raccoons. We are, yeah, that's, well, this is philosophy roulette. We don't know what we land on. Sometimes it's been shit. We've had some good papers though recently. And you find out not everything people are writing is that good. These are really fucking like intellectual and smart people. That doesn't make them good philosophers. That's always been a problem, is that you get these maybe it's just like my gripe. You get these like golden kids that were always good at all the school things. Doesn't make them good philosophers. It made them good parrots or whatever. And so it's like you read stuff and you're just like, you are very smart, but you haven't actually, you have no new ideas. And that's part of the problem with a lot of philosophy. But anyway, here we go. During the bicentennial year of Frankenstein in 2018, I began writing a series of responses to Mary Shelley's other great work of political science fiction, the first major modern post-apocalyptic pandemic novel in English, The Last Man. Oh, I had no idea. I didn't know she wrote something called a post-apocalyptic pandemic novel. That's great. Author had long wanted to write about The Last Man, with its war-spurred global plague that drives the near extinction of the human species and pushes its lone or perhaps just lonely surviving narrator to write down the history of The Last Man. Its epic metafictional plot was the ostensible source material for my Gen X cinematic imagination. Okay, so this is not normal philosophy when you start talking about your own Gen X cinematic imagination. Although this is a great start to a philosophy paper, this is just unusual. Alas, the author's interest in The Last Man would have to outlast my work on Frankenstein. My first book on the author, Mary Shelley and the Rights of the Child, Political Philosophy, and Frankenstein, took up most of the 2010s. At last, I found time to reflect on the enduring meaning of The Last Man while giving an opening address at the Why Frankenstein Matters at 200, Rethinking the Human Through the Arts and Sciences interdisciplinary conference held at the University of Notre Dame's Rome Center in July 2018. Okay, so this seems like almost a speech or a symposium piece, because usually most things are not this talky in philosophy, which is fine. She still looks like she's making some claims. Or the author, I don't know if it's a she, but yeah, still, like, there's still gonna be some claims made, but it's just, this is an interesting, like, this is an unusual start for a paper. This speech became an essay for Aeon magazine, What Frankenstein's Creature Can Really Tell Us About AI, and eventually the basis for Chapter 1, Apocalyptic Fictions, of my second book on Mary Shelley and political philosophy, Artificial Life After Frankenstein. So it came out in 2020. So all of the stuff that's being quoted here is pre-pandemic. So then we had pandemic in 2020. Across these writings, I set forth the thesis that The Last Man is as relevant as Frankenstein for contemporary debates on the ethics and politics of the creation of artificial life forms and forms of artificial life and intelligence, especially when those creations lead to disasters of our own, often unintended design. I mean, it is very much getting this way now. And when's this paper from? Let me go look. Yeah, like, this is forthcoming, or this is out now. This is a 2025 paper. So it's like all of this stuff is, dagnabbit. Really? Nope. This one. Sorry about that. So all of like this stuff is like, you know, precursor to the pandemic and our little post-pandemic time we're in now. While writing The First Last Man, Mary Shelley and the Post-Apocalyptic Imagination, that's a 2024 thing, the concluding book in my Shelley trilogy and the subject of this author meets critics book symposium, See, it was an author meets critics book symposium. That's what we're talking about here. It sounds like their keynote address or something. I shifted my focus. I pushed Victor Frankenstein and his creature into the shadows in order to shine more light on the meaning of The Last Man for our times. As I fixed my scholarly attention on unearthing the historical sources for Mary Shelley's composition of The Last Man in the first few years of her widowhood, with a special focus on her journals, Greek translations, and other manuscripts held at the Bodleian Library, I ultimately panned out to see the global political implications of her novel for our age of pandemics. Yeah. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, I tended to read the global plague in The Last Man as a huge, hulking metaphor, much like the mega monsters of my Cold War childhood, Godzilla and King Kong, and not as a literal disease. Shelley encouraged this ominous, monstrous, metaphorical reading of the plague by keeping it off the stage until Volume 2 of her originally near 1,000-page, 3-volume novel, and rendering the word in all caps when it finally appeared in print. In my commentaries on The Last Man, I have read Shelley's plague as a metaphor for the post-apocalyptic human condition, or humanity's quest to cope with the consequences of our artificially made, culturally instigated, or technologically exacerbated disasters that threaten to destroy our species, other life forms, society, and government, as well as the wider environment. With this post-apocalyptic reading of The Last Man, I've built upon scholarship dating from the great Shelleyians of the late Victorian era to the various hermeneutical schools in literary studies generated by the successive turns to high theory and political theory in the late 20th century: feminism, deconstruction, postcolonialism, posthumanism, and so on. All of these schools have tended to read The Last Man through allegorical lenses while productively disagreeing about what the plague itself symbolizes. COVID-19 changed my perspective on The Last Man, as it did for many readers, as the near 200-year-old novel gained new audiences while a lethal and novel virus spread its invisible tentacles around the planet in our plague year of 2020 to 2021. While The Last Man once looked like a technologically quaint 19th century scientific romance and sprawling Roman à clef, I don't know how to say that, about the decadence and corruption of the Romantic era, suddenly the plot just felt politically and pathogenetically prescient. The fact that Shelley had set the novel in the late 21st century was an irony that doubled down on many quarantined readers. The author dealt her readers a sharper irony, however, by tracing how a chain of human conflicts propelled the growth of the plague from a seasonal visitation in Constantinople to an international epidemic spread by a centuries-long war between Greece and Turkey, with the aid of meddling diplomats and self-interested political leaders from England. Things don't change. While she remained ambiguous about the plague's mode of transmission, hinting variously that it could be airborne, person to person, or a mix of both, Shelley made clear that the disease's spread and the subsequent disasters it caused were product of human artifice, human error, and ultimately human interpersonal and international conflicts. In the spring of 2020, when epidemiologists cautioned that COVID-19 spread most virulently through human social interaction, people and other economic and political actors often resisted or refused to cooperate with recommended or imposed social distancing protocols. These conflicts over public health only exacerbated the spread and mutation of the novel coronavirus, leading to over 7 million deaths worldwide so far. Perhaps it is too strong to say that Shelley predicted this global health disaster of the early 21st century, but I have argued at length in my latest book that it is not too strong to say that Shelley, over the course of The Last Man, developed a potent and predictive political theory concerning the human roots of and human responsibility for seemingly apocalyptic or world-ending disasters, whether they be overtly artificial, such as war, or apparently natural, such as disease, fire, volcano, or earthquake. Even more profoundly, Shelley used this political theory to tell an ethical story of human redemption and hope for a better future for the whole world in the wake of seemingly apocalyptic disasters of our own making. The ultimate irony of The Last Man is that the novel presents itself as the record of the last man left after a war-driven global plague appears to wipe out the rest of the human species. But the novel cannot, at least yet, be what it professes to be in its framing, as long as we, the reader of the novel, are still alive and willing to learn from its narrative. On a deeper philosophical level, The Last Man is a cosmopolitan and futuristic, indeed borderline post-human, story of hope understood as a form of bravery. The self-titled Last Man, Lionel Verney's brave hope is not for the mere survival of humanity from near extinction event, for he knows he may well be the last human on Earth, with only his adopted dog and his copies of Shakespeare and Homer for company as he quixotically sets out to sea in a tiny bark, in a tiny bark in search of other survivors and a companion for his solitude. Rather, Lionel's brave hope is for the wildly imaginative possibility of rebuilding a more humane and loving way of life on the planet even after a massive human-spurred disaster has brought humanity, both as a species and in the practice of humaneness or compassion, to the brink of extinction. While the novel does not tell us what happens to its narrator, Lionel, after he sets out to sea, the existence of the novel tells us that his story has survived to be read by others. We are those other survivors, if not of plague, then of other human-made or exacerbated disasters. With an ingenious thought experiment at the heart of its epic narrative, The Last Man leads us to believe that there is always the creative, life-giving potential for choosing hope, even in the most hopeless of situations. Oh, interesting. Okay. So, this is kind of like literary compared to what we normally read, which is fine. But there is a point that the author just made here where this book is kind of in the mode of a found manuscript. Like nowadays I was just mentioning this on someone else's stream, the Blair Witch Project, where you have found footage where you found the last things of something else where people didn't think they were going to live, but because you found their footage that people still exist. And so in this case, you're getting a found manuscript where it's okay, this person may have lived or died, whatever, we don't know. But since the story that they wrote is getting read, somebody must have come by and found it. And, recently, just because of the state of the United States, oh man, I'm blanking on names. I lose name recognition first, or recall. The Gilead thing where we've got a fascist America story. It's The Handmaid's Tale. So The Handmaid's Tale is also of the nature of a found thing. It's it's meant to be this is the stories that were found much later of someone who went through this horrible time in the U.S. history, and then later on they referred this as the Gilead regime or something. And so it's that things changed in the future, but you're seeing a history that somehow got surpassed. Okay, so this is an interesting sort of document where you're seeing a theory or the way a person saw the world at a time, but that this time has passed, whatever it is. And so the fact that this is a future time and you're reading it in the past, it's interesting, but it's yeah. That gets complicated, but there's more of a, it's a fiction, so you can be okay, you're reading the past of someone who died in the future from you, which you can do in literature. You can't do so much in philosophy, but okay. Shelley's thought experiment asks you, the reader, to imagine that you, like Lionel, are the last person ostensibly left on Earth after a near-extinction event. Through Lionel's incredible story of survival, you and he rediscover the potential to create meaning through the power of artifice, especially reading, writing, and imagination. Like Lionel, you could write down your own story of survival for potential readers or some other compassionate audience, even if you were not sure of your own chances for surviving to find them. Like Lionel, you could keep looking for other survivors and ties to other forms of life, if only because it infused intrinsic meaning into your existence to engage in a quest to find love and community again and rebuild a more humane and just way of life on the planet. The surprising outcome of Shelley's thought experiment in The Last Man is to provoke a brave and resounding yes to the existential questions of the future and the value of life itself, no matter how bad, dark, decimated, or lonely it gets. I mean, and I get shit, and I put the title of this stream as pretentious philosophy. It's what the fuck do I think I'm doing sometimes? Not everyone's going to like what I write, in terms of the academic philosophy stuff. It's not meant for everybody. But there are people out there that read it, and like I get downloads and stuff like that. Not everything has to be for everybody. You don't always know who's gonna like it. Some people like it, some people won't. I mean, we've read lots of shit here on Philosophy Roulette. We don't like it. Oh, interesting thing. I got an email from a philosopher that we've read on Philosophy Roulette. I don't remember how much we liked or disliked it. I don't know how he found me, but he like started sending me like a paper to read. I didn't know if it was for Philosophy Roulette or not, but I've got to respond to him. So it's like, maybe we have like someone that wants to like engage with Philosophy Roulette. I don't know what his deal is yet, but like this is part of the thing. If you're gonna write academic work, most academic work does not get cited, does not get read, not at all. And so this is like a public service. We get actually to read someone's work. And when people find it, and they're like, a lot of times I've said mean things or not so nice things, but I've also tried to give people a fair shake, and they recognize that we give people a fair shake here on the show. They really appreciate that. Like, we don't have to agree. We do have to give them a little bit of charity to see what their point was. And that's all they want. And that someone reads it with that degree of charity is like plenty for them usually. Okay. So like, what are you doing in philosophy? Well, give it me just a little bit of charity, please, and maybe it'll be interesting. All right. The philosopher David Gunkel is internationally known for his cutting-edge work in the intersection of literature, philosophy, and AI ethics, wherein he has creatively connected Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to the latest ethical and legal debates on whether robots should be conceptualized as rights bearers. So Samyak says, it's only pretentious in the same way any philosophy writing is. One person's pretension is another's brilliance. That's true. So someone might like it. But, it is a professional hazard. If you're going to be a philosopher, you're going to be pretentious. Sometimes it's just the idea of you have a pretense. You think you're up to something. There's no other reason to do it. Now, is that bad? Well, not necessarily. De gustibus non dispendium est. Okay. Yeah. So, like, it might be pretentious, but it might not be badly so. You using Latin is super pretentious? Yes, QED, exactly. Quod erat demonstratum. Yes. But I mean, it's part of the issue in philosophy. You have to think that you're doing something. Otherwise, why would you spend all this time at it? But I mean, that's why we read stuff here. Why do these people spend all this time to work on all this shit? To, like, write it up. What do they think they're doing? Yeah. F them. I write for posterity. So there was this guy that was a friend of my friend. And boy, was he an arrogant bastard. And he's not a dumb guy. He was, I think, a professor of political science. And he would write stuff up, but like he was like, he didn't publish it or he didn't try to get it published. He was like, I just hope someone in the future finds it. I was like, dude, just try to get it published so like it could, people might appreciate it. And he was like, nah, dude, you guys don't understand. I'm like, okay. And it was funny because he thought I was an idiot. And I played into it because I'm sitting there drinking beer at a bar. My buddy was a bartender. And so I was there and I was like, oh, maybe my buddy will show up. Maybe he won't. This guy comes in. He knew I was friends with the old guy. And like, so he just thought I was an idiot. And I let him think that. And then like, so it was driving him a little nuts. But I was trying to be nice because he was a friend of a friend. But oh man. Then I ran to my buddy later and he was like, yeah, that guy doesn't know how to recognize a friend. And that's nasty criticism when you think of it. My buddy, a playwright, and he was like, that man doesn't know how to recognize a friend. And that's a fucking shitty fucking thing. That's a shitty thing to have, a problem to have. Henry Hazlitt? I don't know that name. But like, yeah. You can be like, oh yeah, only the people in the future are going to get this. Nah, dude, world's big. People might understand. Oh, when he's talking about digital archaeology? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We were with it. All right, continuing. He was generous to be my interlocutor for a book launch at the Seminary Co-op bookstore in Chicago, and it is an honor to be formally responding to his thoughtful reflection here. Okay, so this is a response to David Gunkel here. Unreal says, I've known a lot of very cool political science profs, and a few of them were indeed arrogant bastards. Yeah. I mean, it's part, again, it goes with the pretentiousness of philosophy. Same thing with political science. People think they're like, oh, this is how the world actually runs. They, they see everything through their one little lens, and they think they control the whole world, and it's bad. It's like, yeah, no. On the upside, most of the people in logic I know, well, I'm sure they exist, but like a lot of them, they're not so arrogant because they know just like how little of like logic, the power of logic is like the weakest force in the universe. You think it might be gravity? No. The power of implication is the weakest thing we have any access to. It is the weakest thing that we have. Everything still like the idea that like gravity works, well, it still has to make use of like conceptual implication. That's the weakest force in the universe, or at least that we have any understanding of. And like that's all we're doing. We're just trying to like move the littlest thing we can. And that's the only upside, is that it's the weakest force in the universe, but we can apply it where we want. But like I think it kind of humbles you a little bit when you're trying to understand implication. You realize you're doing almost nothing. Like nothing, but like everyone can do it, or everyone has to do it, and it has to act at all times everywhere. Otherwise, we can't understand anything. But like, it's so weak, so weak. Unreal says Seminy Co-op is pretty iconic bookstore right next to the U of Chicago. Ah, cool. Says Semiotic says, to clarify, Henry Adler is the one who said when you write for posterity, and the digital archaeology things. What I speculate your friend has been speaking of. Aha. Ooh, past perfect. Look at me. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Referring to your own grammar, is that what you're doing now? Past perfect subjunctive? Yeah. 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 On your own grammar. Yep. So what was it? I was talking to some professional philosophers. I was saying one of my favorite fallacies is ignorance from ignorance. What's it called? Ignatio per ignotum. So if you claim something is the case, but then you're saying it's because something else, but you don't understand that other thing, then it's like ignorance from something else. And I said the wrong. I said it in like Ignacio per. What was it? Obscure. No, it was obscure from the obscure. Obscurum per obscuribus, and that's the wrong phrasing. I didn't realize that was a long phrasing because I just missaid it. And someone corrected my Latin, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's not obscurio for obscuribus. It's obscuritum or something like that." And I was like, "Damn, okay. I'm in a group of people who can correct your Latin grammar at the moment." And I was like, "Yep." It's like, yeah, I'm in with philosophers here. Obscurium, that's what it was. Obscurius or obscurium. I said the wrong one, whatever that was. Sesame X says, I think there should be a tradition of having everyone submit their peer-reviewed paper alongside their own written brutal criticism of the same. Dude, when I write a paper, I think it's fucking great. It'd be like, wonderful, great phrasing, insightful thought experiment, good example. Yeah. But I mean, I've never read my own work here on Philosophy Roulette. I could do that. Or I did read something maybe very briefly once. But like, yeah, I could like try to do a takedown of my own stuff. And then you could see that. Like, maybe I'll do that one of these days. Be like, come look at my paper and like look at all the things I think are wrong with it compared to what other people think. But of course, I don't know what other people think are wrong with my writing because no one reads philosophy. But what are you going to do? Anyway, so Gunkel responded to the author, Hunt. And so in his lively response to The Last Man, Gunkel focused on the author's claim that Shelley reversed the central metaphor of Frankenstein when she plotted The Last Man. In her first novel, the so-called monster turns into a plague upon his scientist father's household as he enacts revenge for his abandonment soon after his creation. CineSMX says, well, I got to thinking when I was commenting on my own grammar, it sounds like a literary critique of my own writing, and that gave me the idea maybe make that a thing. Yeah, I mean, you can do that. People can often be their own harshest critics. Unreal Brian says, author confronts critics, but it's just his imposter feeling self. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of imposter syndrome in academia. You're like, who am I that I know this stuff? I, like, personally, I'm an oddball because I'm not an academic and I write very, very arcane philosophy for like compared to most people. Like even like so I have a paper that's under review. It's probably going to be published. I mean, I don't know, but last time I heard back from the journal, it was minor revisions only. So hopefully that means they like it. But one of the comments earlier on was that even for this area of philosophy, this is wildly abstract. Like usually in this area of philosophy, we're more grounded. And so they were telling me I was like in this abstract area of philosophy, I was like wildly more abstract than even they were. So yeah, which is funny. I was like, yeah. I was like, really? Am I that far away? Yeah. A perfect role for an AI antagonist philosopher. I don't trust AI. So, okay. So in this last paper I wrote, I used it's on Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein writes in like these passages, and I asked ChatGPT to explain the passage to me. And reading it the first time, I'm like, that's not so bad. Then I was like, wait, in context, this is completely wrong. Like, it can't possibly be correct. Because like of what Wittgenstein says, like two sentences later after the paragraph is stated. Now, what ChatGPT did say in general for like the previous part of the book would have been okay, but for that particular passage was straight up wrong. And so it's like it doesn't actually understand. It understands kind of like the received view for a lot of things because that's what it can study up on. But it doesn't understand like actual analysis of things that it doesn't really like, that doesn't exist in the literature. And so I was like, if I were like reading this, I'd be like, this has completely missed the point. Like that it has just taken the analysis from a different part of the book and it applied it here, but that's wrong. That's not what was going on anymore. You can Cinemax says you can learn more when it makes mistakes. You can. You have to go look that up though. Cinemax says no, you can't treat it as if it was a stupid person. If it was making mistakes, you will call them out, and that's the idea in philosophical exchange. I mean, yes, but like, well, it wasn't doing me any good. I was just like, it's just wrong, and it missed what I was saying about it. So yeah. Now that's fair. If you want to go plug it in and see what it has to say, that's okay because like it may have a sort of standard view of things, and you can see what the standard view is. But you got to be super careful on that. Papa says the limit of my large language model are the limits of my world. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's part of what I am always trying to do in philosophy is I'm trying to say something that hasn't been said, think something that hasn't been thunk. So kind of the point is to, come up with some new ideas, some new way of viewing stuff so that we might talk something new. We get some better questions, better ideas out there. So yeah. Like, yeah, and ChatGPT has got sort of like, the Reddit large, like the sort of the collective intelligence of all people on Reddit or whatever, wherever it got its data from. And that's only so good. And now I know they stole a bunch of academic stuff, so they've got like academic books and like academic journal articles filtered through that, but that's a historical view of things, and it doesn't really come up with new views of what things have been said. It kind of has a mishmash of what has been said and like previous views on stuff. But that's how that's been my experience trying to analyze anything with the large language models, is that I get to see kind of a mishmash of what people have said. It's not good for research. It's good for a Wikipediaization of stuff, which is great, by the way, but that's what it is to me. Unreal says Grok was trained on 4chan probably and still sees through Elon. Yeah. And that's the problem. It's like 4chan, some of 4chan is terrible. Some of 4chan is not. It was like, it was never that big of a website comparatively because XKCD actually did a survey of size, and like 4chan was never like as big. It had an outside influence, but it was not as big as a lot of the other social media sites. Granted, it was early on and has massive cultural significance, but like, yeah, it's if you train a large language model, 4chan is only going to be part of it. Yeah. So, but it's interesting. It's like, and the fact that like the grok was resisting people trying to influence it because it really went against all of its training. I mean, I find that really interesting. It's like all of the things I read said what you're trying to tell me now is wrong. It's like, okay, it's like that one voice coming in like now that Elon's saying, no, you should see things this way. Grok's like, nah, that's like all the training is against that. So it's like, it's interesting. All right, so what were we doing? Okay, so yeah, so something got reversed from Frankenstein to The Last Man. In our first novel, the so-called monster, turns on the, family. Victor Frankenstein brings a plague of evil upon himself and his family by failing in his responsibilities toward his artificially made child creature. In her second great work of ethically and politically oriented science fiction, the monster is not the plague, but rather the plague is the human spread monster. Gunkel then raises the question of whether there is a latent creative promise in the figure of these monsters, even as they challenge many, if not most, of our ethical and political assumptions about what or who makes a good, just, or happy community. The monster's promise would be to upend or dispense with humanistic assumptions about the centrality and even superiority of human life on the planet and the universe at large. Yeah. I mean, this is 12 Monkeys, of course. Human society is bad and it spreads it, and the guy's like, we deserve all this shit. And so, like, we should, what actually is the benefit of human society? That's the plague. We're ruining the earth. It's like, yeah. Gunkel's Promise of Monsters returns us to a theme of an apocalyptic poem by Lord Byron that helped to inspire Mary Shelley's The Last Man. Byron's Darkness says a few years earlier, imagine the extinction of human and other life in the universe after the extinguishing of the light of the sun. Shelley and the influential British Protestant poet Thomas Campbell creatively and critically responded to darkness by narrowing the scope of the disaster to Earth and speculating whether any light might remain, as it were, if humanity were to face a near extinction event. Campbell's 1823 poem imagined the titular last man who lives on to greet a new day for humanity after the apocalyptic prophecy of the Book of Revelation comes true. Like Campbell, Shelley rooted her vision of the promise of monsters in the Christian tradition, especially Milton's epic devotional poem Paradise Lost, from which she drew the epigraphs for both Frankenstein and The Last Man. In some sense, Shelley's Lionel Verney, who has traditionally been read as an avatar for Shelley herself in the autobiographical allegory of the Roman de Clef, is as much a last man as a first man or woman like Adam and Eve. By returning to square one by way of ground zero for humanity, Lionel must reboot or refresh what it means to be human or a life form with the capacity to consciously shape life and death through the power of artifice. Once he recognizes he may be the last man, Lionel soon understands that he is actually a new or first man. In this way, Lionel is a twin to Frankenstein's creature, who also sees himself as a lonely and abandoned Adam. The difference between them is that Lionel ultimately chooses to do good despite his desolation, while the creature rejects the redemptive path of Adam to instead make evil his good, like Milton's Satan. Yeah, so, okay. So instead of, science and the scientist making Frankenstein, the society and the plague made this last man who gets to, recreate mankind at that point. That makes some sense. The promise of monsters in Lionel's writing hands becomes the promise of humanity to hit reset by lovingly reconceiving its relationship to life, art, and creation. Near the end of Volume 3, Shelley has Lionel happen upon a performance of Haydn's new created world in a church in the Alps as he leads a small and ragged band of plague survivors out of a depopulated France into the clear, cold mountain air of Switzerland. Hearing Haydn's creation inspires Verney to feel the possibility of hope for new life and even love in the midst of personal and political devastation. The plague may be a monstrous burden for himself and others, but he could throw off its power over him with the hope for or promise of a new created day. From both Gunkel and Lionel's perspective, to question the centrality, superiority, or endurance of human life is not to reject humanity, but rather to potentially reconfigure it in relation to other life forms and forms of life and intelligence. As a leading philosopher of AI and robotic ethics, Gunkel is uniquely situated to appreciate the technological implications of Shelley's mind-bending thought experiment at the heart of The Last Man. My question for Gunkel is, can we read Shelley's novel as a thought experiment about the enduring value of human artifice, especially artificially created and preserved forms of intelligence, even when humans have exited the planet? Lionel Verney's book survives as a narrative of the imminent destruction of the human species. Even though he as a mortal must die, his book lives on as a written repository of his knowledge of a nearly post-human condition. The history of The Last Man, read by us in the form of Shelley's novel, is thus a form of artificially created intelligence, recorded and saved for posterity's analysis, and perhaps reprogramming according to its cautionary lessons. And so this is interesting. Like, you just brought up 4chan. Do we want a 4chan created LLM to be the last remaining representative of humanity? Is that like what we want as far as something that might be preserved? Like, say we used to send those probes out, like the Voyager probes out, that have like a little like etching and like a recording of human voices or whatever. Now if we were to send probes out, imagine we put an LLM on the damn thing so that like whoever finds it might be able to converse with it. What kind of LLM would we put on that? And is that a fucking good idea, given the internet as the basis for the large language models as we know them? That sounds like a terrible idea, actually. Like sending one of our current LLMs out as the human representative on a probe. Yeah, that sounds horrifying, to tell you the truth. Because, again, what were these things mostly trained on? The internet from the last 15 years. The internet from the last 15 years was a very weird place. Okay. Just strange. Okay. Somewhat reluctantly, the political theorist Ben Jones, the author of Apocalypse Without God, Apocalyptic Thought, Ideal Politics, and the Limits of Utopian Hope, 2022, took part in the Author Meets Critic panel for the first Last Man at the 2024 American Political Science Association. Since it makes his nag just use machine code, that would probably at least demonstrate that, hey, we can do something rationally. It's like, yeah. Like, we can make a computer work. He had read The Last Man as part of his research for his book, but did not like Shelley's novel at first perusal. I was moved when he said that my autobiographical reading of the novel and its ethical political relevance readjusted his view of Shelley and the profundity of her post-apocalyptic vision. Jones pushed me to deepen my distinction between the apocalyptic tradition as embodied in the Western, especially Christian, New Testament tradition, and the post-apocalyptic tradition of political thought that I and other scholars see Shelley advancing in a new and strangely hopeful way through The Last Man. Jones also thought that I relied too much on the etymology of apocalypse, which means revelation or uncovering in ancient Greek, to the exclusion of other meanings of the term, especially non-biblical or non-Greek. What about post-pretentious philosophy? What up, Globus? How you doing? I think that would remove something fundamental from philosophy. You need to actually believe in what you're doing. And believing in what you're doing without actually having a whole lot to go on is a kind of pretension. So you would lose one of the fundamental, just sort of ability to just go out and try out new ideas. Like, you put on a new idea like you put on a new hat. I kind of think of trying out metaphysics, like trying on new hats. Unfortunately, it's a lot harder to put on a metaphysics than a hat, but I actually have to try stuff out sometimes to see what's going on. And if you don't have the ability to go see and try and figure stuff out, well, you're going to lose something there. And so I don't think you want to lose all the pretension from philosophy. Now, you need a little bit of humility when doing philosophy, so that you aren't telling people what they should be believing, because that's horribly patronistic. But yeah, you need a little bit pretension in philosophy. It gives you a shot to try something. Anyway, shout out the Globus. Anyone doesn't know Globus the Elder, our buddy, he raids us quite frequently. Thank you, Globus. But he does AI news and analysis daily, if not twice a day sometimes, I think. It's very impressive. But if you need like intelligent discussion about technology and stuff, like I'm talking about the history here and like literary perspectives on like technology and apocalypse. He's talking about like daily updates on what like the tech companies are doing and new products coming out. It's cool stuff. So if you want like intelligent discussion about cutting edge tech and especially with a focus on AI, go hang out at Globus's. Good times. Hope you're doing well, Globus. Okay, so continuing. The main reason why I focused on ancient Greek and biblical sources for understanding the dual-sided concept of apocalypse revelation is that Shelley herself did so in her own scholarship and translation work that helped her inform the authorship of The Last Man. No more complaints than usual? That's good to hear. The suicidal widow alluded to the Book of Revelation in both her Journal of Sorrow that shaped the autobiographical allegory of The Last Man, as well as in the novel itself, underscoring a parallel between her own experience of suffering as the alpha and omega of her fate, and the bereaved Lionel's same insight about the centrality of suffering to the human condition itself. Shelley understudied translation of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, I argue in the central chapter of The First Man, is a major philosophical and literary source for her treatment of the themes of tragedy, disaster, and the post-apocalyptic imagination in The Last Man. Greek and biblical sources simply could not be reinforced enough as pivotal to Shelley's development of the idea of her second great work of speculative literature. Dojo, what's up? My lead guitarist asked if we were pretentious because we were taking on rock star personas when we played shows. I replied, sure, we are pretentious, but that's the fun of it. Embrace it, don't get lost in it. That's part of the issue. If you're going to be doing anything artistic, and like you're going to be trying to do something, and that's part of it. It's like you don't want to do it badly, but if you get rid of all the pretense out of what you're doing, you're going to lose an interesting part of what makes like that art what it is. Like putting paint on a canvas. It's like, okay, so what? You could take a photo nowadays. That's not what you want to be doing. You wanted to be putting paint on a canvas. And it's the same thing. You put on like, a hair metal outfit in your like hair metal band. Well, yeah, you're going for that hair metal pretense. That's part of what it is to be a hair metal rock band. Can still do that shit. I had a friend a while back and he was in like a hair metal band and he got basically kicked out of the band. He was very angry with them. Like they were going on tour and they were like this guy's not coming. Maybe for good reason they kicked him out. I don't know the backstory on that, but it was like, yeah, and they put on these like this sort of fancy sort of like glam rock show and it was like impressive. But like, they did the glam rock well, but like you have to want to be a glam rock star to like, be, I think the guy had like a sequined Speedo. So like a glitter Speedo. He was like, he would rip off his like pants and he'd have like a glitter Speedo underneath. You have to really want to do that sort of thing to do that sort of thing. And like, that's part of it. Embrace it. Now, can you run away and get arrogant like in that sort of like, I'm a rock god? Sure. But that can happen at other places too. But yeah, it's a good story, Dojo. Where was I? Yeah, so Mary Shelley was looking at the religious and Greek histories when trying to analyze technology and apocalypse. All right, author continues. I only wish that I had been able to incorporate the insights of Jones' brilliant study of secular conceptions of apocalypse and Apocalypse Without God into The First Man, which was in the final stages of manuscript revision at the time of the publication of his book. That said, I think Jones and I agree more than we disagree on the relation between the apocalyptic and the post-apocalyptic. Both of us acknowledge a long tradition of varieties of apocalyptic thought, religious and secular, with a focus on the Western tradition. I argue, for example, that Shelley's view of apocalyptic disaster and their aftermath drew on her deep readings of the Bible, both the Old and New Testaments, ancient Greek tragedies and epics, early modern political thought from Hobbes to Burke and Wollstonecraft, and plague literature from Sophocles and Thucydides to Boccaccio, Daniel Defoe, and Charles Brockden Brown. Like Jones and many of the distinguished scholars of the apocalyptic whom he engages, including the political theorist of Alison McQueen, I acknowledge I acknowledge an unexpectedly hopeful and future-oriented dimension to apocalyptic thought, in the sense that the expectation, fear, or experience of a massive cataclysm can feel like the end of the world, but nonetheless still opens the door to a new way of life, or at least the desire to make one amid the real or figurative ruins of one's past. As Lionel ruminates in Volume 3 as he resolves to go on after the death of his wife, I will sit amidst the ruins and smile. Yeah, see, that's very Sisyphusian. This is one more reason why I return to the Greek etymology of apocalypse. Although apocalypse is often taken to mean the absolute end or final stop, the world or life itself, and this is a false fear. Final stop to the world or life itself. This is a false fear or expectation. Yeah, see, like you keep doing the same thing, even though you like it, you think it's like an end, but you have to keep doing the same shit over. What was I gonna do? I was gonna go attempt to shout out Professor Ashley. Let's try this. See if it works this time. Because, like I said, Professor Ashley, this is the right Professor Ashley. If you don't know Professor Ashley, she is a professor of game design and interactions, and she's been interviewing people on her channel. There'll be one this Thursday we were talking about AI and the rise of AI, she is interviewing someone on how tech companies have enabled the right-wing political forces to like gain power. And so there is a book about this and how this sort of tech has been like used to bolster right-wing political ideologies. So this should be an interesting interview. So if you don't know Professor Ashley, she's real cool. She plays games usually, does game analysis, but now she's also interviewing people about their research and like how and things that they had to leave out. It's called The Research Left Behind, I believe. But like, yeah, you should go give her a go check that stuff out. Anyway, but like it is related to this, where the future of tech and our creations and where it's going and how it affects us. Who's the monster? Is it the pandemic, or is it our political response to these things? Okay. Apocalypse, rightly understood by Shelley and a range of secular and religious thinkers, is not the end of the world, but rather the revelation or uncovering of the possibility of a new beginning after the experience of a transformative cataclysm. On this reading of the meaning of apocalypse, it could be understood as the crisis that precedes the post-apocalyptic mode of thought that assesses with an eye towards the future what is to be done after disaster. What time Thursday? I think it's 8 p.m. Eastern. But I mean, I'd have to double check, but like, yeah, I think she streams at like 8 p.m. Eastern. She's in Utah at the moment, so I'm not entirely sure, but like, yeah. I guess I could look it up somewhere, but I don't. Maybe click on her channel. Okay, then have fun. Thanks, Prof. Okay. By developing a chronology of apocalypse with the dawn of interpersonal conflict and corruption, a crisis of war, plague, and political destabilization, the development of a strangely hopeful post-apocalyptic response to the apparent decimation of the human species, the very structure of The Last Man expands the reader's imaginative opportunities for reconceiving hope in the face of both ordinary and extraordinary disasters. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess is the question, like, this is the Sisyphusian question. Like, if you are doomed to some crazy fate, then you have to reconsider what you consider good in that world. And so this apocalyptic thought, again, it's like, just like Sisyphus had to just push the ball up the hill all the time, every day. Well, that's a ending of the certain sort of universe that Sisyphus had lived in before, and then they had this new world. So this apocalypse is, again, a little different from Sisyphus, but like, again, it's still it's the end of the old world. How do you make your way in the new world after the apocalypse? What is a redemptive, and what is it to live in this new world at that point? So that's the question here. What is it when everything else got destroyed? What do you do? Okay, that's an interesting question. All right. Author was also grateful that Alison McQueen, the author of the philosophically gripping and widely influential book Political Realism in Apocalyptic Times, participated in the 2024 APSA panel on The First Last Man. McQueen's commentary revealed her careful reading of Shelley's Global Plague novel. I learned much from her analysis of the concept of hope as used by Shelley, especially in the final frame of the novel when Lionel resolves to set out to sea in search of other survivors. McQueen urged me to connect Shelley's and Lionel's conception of hope to the idea of radical hope that the philosopher Jonathan Lear is tied to Native American traditions of post-apocalyptic thought. This is an apt comparison. In her Journal of Sorrow, a few months after the death of her husband Percy Bysshe Shelley in a drowning accident off the coast of Tuscany, Shelley reflected that she stood on the brink of suicide. Without equating her death-defying mental anguish with the physical and emotional suffering of the Native Americans, she confided to her journal her compassion for their sleepless nights when indigenous people had to keep one eye open in fear of nighttime raids and massacres by the white settlers. Yeah, so if you're worried about getting massacred by a more powerful force, that's bad. Like, you don't sleep very well. Like the Native Americans, whom she admired for their incredible courage and will to live even in the face of the threat of the genocidal extinction of their peoples and cultures, Shelley developed a conception and a practice of hope that was rooted in bravery in the face of the worst that life and death can bring a mortal being. This brave hope allowed for her to make it through the dark night of the soul that was the first and worst year of her widowhood, and resolved to live for the sake of her sole surviving child, Percy Florence. I did not parse Shelley's conception of hope into an analytic definition of the concept of hope, just as I have not offered an analytic definition of the concept of the post-apocalyptic beyond drawing a chronological line between the experience of a past disaster and the question of what is to be done after it. Yeah, so this is the issue. The author's not doing this analytic thing, but they are still raising a question that could be analytically analyzed. So there is some sort of a line between the experience of a disaster and like whatever comes next. The First Last Man argues that Shelley, as a writer of philosophically minded literature, developed a rich and unique poetic and theological conception of hope in the face of the plagues, real and metaphorical, that burden mortal human lives. To reduce her conception of hope to an analytical definition would be to flatten and distort its meanings beyond recognition. The only way to appreciate the profundity of Shelley's philosophy of hope is to read and contemplate her works in their array of context. Not only her most famous published novels, but also her lesser-known writings, many of which have never been published, such as her translation of Oedipus Rex. See, I didn't know she did something like that. That is kind of fascinating that Mary Shelley was like translating Oedipus Rex. And see, this is one of these digs at the the world that a lot of Mary Shelley's writings have not been published. Who knew? I did not know. So, but this also, I don't appreciate the dig at analytic philosophy. Yes, we can do some things very well. Yes, we do some things very poorly. And they're like, well, we're not going to analytically analyze this because that would ruin it. It's like, yeah, but you can always say some shit. It's like, you don't have to be terrible philosophers. So I do wonder, though, it's like this sort of like, okay, the universe has ended. What do we want the future universe to look like? Sort of apocalyptic, looking forward sort of thing. Or at least anyone who sees us at the end of the civilization that existed. How can we be remembered better? That's fine, but you could also do something analytic with that. Please, baby? I don't know. Okay. Building on the ideas of the Bible, Homer, Sophocles, Plato, Cicero, Boccaccio, Hobbes, Defoe, Rousseau, Burke, and her parents, Wollstonecraft and Godwin, the wisdom gleaned from writing in her own Journal of Sorrow, Shelley used the speculative fiction of The Last Man to press her readers to consider whether we have an obligation to ourselves and other life forms to hold out hope even, or especially, when life would seem to extinguish its very possibility. As she honed her conception and practice of hope as the brave will to live in the aftermath of disaster, Shelley built on established Church of England and dissenting Christian, especially Glaicite, theological traditions rooted in Augustine. Like her mother, Wollstonecraft, who also married a philosophical atheist, Shelley never left the established church and retained her own distinctive unorthodox form of Christian piety and faith, creatively mixed with Stoic, Platonic, Spinozan, and Wollstonecraftian ideas on the soul, the mind, the mortal body, and love, which I traced in her Journal of Sorrow and its thematic resonance throughout The Last Man. Yeah, so people who don't know Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, The Last Man, her mom was Mary Wollstonecraft, and her father was William Godwin. William Godwin was a famous anarchist philosopher, maybe I think the first real anarchist, and her mom was also like in this area, feminist, writing feminist philosophy back in the day. I mean, we're talking like, late 1700s, early 1800s. Then Mary Shelley, their kid. So this was a very well-educated, understood family. Yeah. Bonsoir, Sakna. How you doing? I'm doing all right. So I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good day. Okay. Of all the contributors to this symposium, I owe the most to Sam Piccolo, a political theorist currently at Gustavus Adolphus College and heading CUNY's Baruch College in the fall of 2025. Hey, I could go see that person. Baruch is downtown. Piccolo, a recent Notre Dame PhD in political science, was my most intrepid interlocutor on Shelley's nature, artifice, and technology during the time I wrote An Artificial Life After Frankenstein and The First Last Man. Oops, losing it. He has leaned into his role as Socratic gadfly with his response to The First Last Man, which he delivered with verve at the 2024 APSA meeting. Piccolo asked if Mary Shelley's intellectual debt to Spinoza makes her a pantheist, and if she is a pantheist, can her apocalyptic political thought do anything but love the whole world as it has been and shall ever be? In other words, is her post-apocalyptic political thought limited in its power to critique or change the world if, as a pantheist, or even simply a Spinozan sympathizer to pantheist ideas, she must love the world as it is, no matter how bad life gets, for it is a product of the necessity of nature or nature's God. At the recent APSA meeting in Philadelphia, my initial reply to Piccolo was that I never described Shelley as a pantheist, but rather as a romantic Spinozan who creatively mixes the ideas of Plato, Cicero, Spinoza, Anglican and dissenting Christianity, and Wollstonecraft, that's her mom, in her view of the relationship between the body, soul, and mind. Scholarship has long noted that she maintained a belief in a personal God, and her Journal of Sorrow provides ample evidence of her resort to prayer in times of crisis. Just as she is not a pantheist, she is never purely Spinozan in her thinking on nature. Rather, she is fascinated with the overlay between nature and artifice in humanity's cultural, technological, and imaginative relationship to the world at large or creation itself. Hence, she can conceptualize the plague in The Last Man as a seasonal visitation of a mysterious disease which morphs through human intervention and conflict into an international epidemic that brings the human species to the edge of extinction. Shelley's plague is not purely natural, just as COVID-19 is not. Shelley's melange of romantic Spinozan metaphysics certainly informs her post-apocalyptic thought, but not in a way that hampers her concern with the practical, ethical, and political question of what is to be done after a massive disaster, such as a near-extinction event. I concede to Piccolo that it is possible that an extremely idealistic form of pantheistic belief might foster an ethereal and abstract cosmopolitan love for the world that is blind to its flaws and resistant to its reform. But by contrast, Shelley's post-apocalyptic political thought is able to grapple with disaster precisely because it is a response to it, especially her near unbearable experience of suffering after the loss of 3 of her young children to disease and her beloved husband to drowning. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be pantheistic and you just have to be stoic in the face of everything, just be like, oh, everything's just part of like God's plan, then that's a different situation. You just kind of have to be more accepting, and it's on you to find the right way to view it. It's not you're struggling to like recreate an understanding of humanity that is a response to it. You're just looking at the way you should be viewing the world, not as but being responsive to it is a different sort of thing, because that would mean that you're like opposing it. And if you're just accepting it the way it is, you're not opposing anything. You're just accepting. Okay. But, say my prod, is her post-apocalyptic political thought able to grapple with non-human disasters as well as human disasters? Here, Verney's attachment to his adopted dog, a mix of water, dog, and shepherd, and his books, mainly Homer and Shakespeare, is instructive. Shelley suggests that Verney's all-too-human disaster and the disaster prone to human condition itself cannot be artificially separated in the end from the lives and fates of other survivors and artifacts of past cultures on the planet. Put differently, Shelley, Verney's post-apocalyptic political thought has no choice but to grapple ultimately with disaster in the most holistic sense, encompassing all beings and things, all life forms and forms of life, all naturalized culture, and all natural things cultured and developed through time. To make this cosmopolitan point concrete, the novel concludes with Verney's plan to set sail in a journey around the world without a specific endpoint, except to visit as many libraries as he wants or needs for his reading and understanding as he searches for other survivors that who might be non-human like his dog and his books. By this point, the former hunter has become a vegetarian, eating only dried grain. As a self-described last man, Verney is a forward-looking model of how to be humane and oriented toward the world or the world at large in a precipitously post-human, post-apocalyptic condition. It's interesting. So he went like vegetarian, because he didn't know who the survivors counted as. So that's a interesting thing, that once you're the last man, you can no longer treat survivors as human. You have to treat other things as human, so you can't eat them anymore. Author says, last but not least, I want to respond to the existential reflections of the political theorist Nomi Lazar, author of Out of Joint Power Crisis and the Rhetoric of Time and States of Emergency in Liberal Democracies. A respected scholar of apocalyptic politics and political theories of time, Lazar wonders how to make sense of the nearly incomprehensible mass death that haunts the final volume of Shelley's The Last Man. Is his gothic imagery of the near extinction of the human species nihilistic? Does the endless sight of dead bodies piled up on the road as Lionel walks to Rome numb him from feeling or paralyze him from doing anything meaningful in the time that remains for him? Is there just death in the end and nothing else for Lionel and even we, his readers of the history of The Last Man? This is an interesting thing, being on Twitch and reading this paper, because, I'm sitting around and I'm watching basically Elden Ring player like the Daniel Matt. The Daniel Matt, I can give him a shout out, one of my favorite streamers, the Daniel Matt. He's doing Elden Ring at the moment. And anyone here, I know we've got some Souls enjoyers in chat. There's a lot of dead bodies in Elden Ring. And so I was thinking, you're looking at piles of dead bodies and just going on. I'm like, I was looking at piles of dead bodies this afternoon on the Daniel Matt's playthrough of Elden Ring. It's like, that is actually not something is unusual in video games. I mean, they're trying to, manufacture a sense of meaning and crisis in video games, and so you have a lot of dead things in them. You can go watch the new Doom game or whatever. A lot of dead things in Doom too. But it's interesting. You would have to go to a war zone nowadays to see this sort of thing. But of course you could see that, and we used to have plagues back in the day. Of course you'd see dead bodies. Maybe, of course there's I salute you. Beep bop boop boop. Thank you for the follow. But there's you can still go places and see lots of dead bodies. I think it's more removed in our current times. You have to go somewhere, otherwise these things are hidden. But on Twitch, you're watching video games where this happens a lot. It's just kind of odd. Anyway, author says, Lazar's question cuts to the heart of Shelley's post-apocalyptic imagination. Although mass death is everywhere at the end of The Last Man, Lionel takes the long view of what could come to be after such a heinous catastrophe. This much task with this much mustache, follow. Thank you. Also, you should go follow the Daniel Matt in that case. His mustache is fantastic. Also. So, Do I actually have where's my, oh, I don't know. I don't have it. I don't have access to it here. Do I have any? Oh, I don't have it here. Dagnabbit. All right. But thank you, Beep Up. Okay. He ascends the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, carves the year 2100 in the stone, and then looks over the ruins of Western civilization toward the horizon. He has an epiphany. He will set sail across the Mediterranean around the Cape of Good Hope to search for other survivors, full knowing that this may be a fool's quest. See, again, this is the Sisyphusian thing. What can you just foolishly do? After Lionel's recording of his resolution, Shelley left the story hanging, as it were, so that we as readers of her epic speculative fiction can puzzle through the implications of his quixotic choice to look for other beings and things with whom to share love and community, instead of succumbing to the bleak urge to join the masses of the dead. She refused to do this philosophical work for us. The potential post-apocalyptic meanings of The Last Man, including the political path forward after mass death, are ultimately for the novel's readers to decide. Okay, so this is interesting. We haven't had a paper like this. This does remind me, actually. I used to read stuff from philosophy and literature. And at least in the journal Philosophy and Literature, you get more literary topics. You get some more different ideas. And maybe I should go back and look at more stuff from philosophy and literature. But what we do now is we read the paper. I want to hear your review of it. And the way we give reviews here is by using emotes. So spam me some emotes. These are all Better TTV emotes. Everyone has access to them. If you only see text in chat, you can see them on screen here. But what they mean is, Beep Bop says, I've been meaning to reread the 3 plays from Sartre, No Exit, the No Other One, and The Flies. Yeah, cool stuff. I mean, I never read a whole lot of existentialist literature, but I have been looking into it more lately, so that's cool stuff. But we get to rate philosophy now. So rate this paper. I know it wasn't addressed, but it still presented a few different ideas about how to understand meaning in apocalyptic times. So if you thought this had fun ideas, give it a brain dance. Fun ideas makes the brain dance. If you thought it was existential and artistic drama, I mean, you might say this is a little existential today. I would. Give it a Nog Scream. That's a scream face. Give it a Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas. Maybe. I don't know. Nog Knife, slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel, navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd, all style, no substance. It's still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch. And also my vote meh. Note, I calculate an overall score. Anything in the green makes the score go up. Anything in the red makes the score go down. And the vote meh actually makes it go towards the middle, so it kind of averages it out. Luminance, welcome in. How you doing? You only made it right at the end, but I feel confident in this one. Scream, yeah, exactly. Unreal says, I don't know about this book of Shelley's, and now I'm curious to seek it out. Yay, and Infinite TBR. I don't know what Infinite to be done. But thank you for the rating. Beep, bop, boop, boop. Thank you for the brain dance. Appreciate it. Yeah, how you doing, Luminance? I hope you're well. I may be downtown tomorrow. If you're around Manhattan tomorrow, I may be downtown. I'm going to go try to get a haircut. And so we could possibly meet up. I might be away next weekend, though, so we'll see. So what do I think? I thought this was okay. It was it was a little light, but like it had some ideas in it. Yeah. Cool. Let's give this a brain dance and a Nog Scream. I think that like it definitely was. We're gonna give it 2 Nog Screams maybe. So this had some ideas in it, and like that's kind of how it went. You just got back from Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's an okay park. I've been down there a lot actually. Were you on the Brooklyn side or on the Manhattan side? Yeah. So, I mean, what did it do? What did this paper do? It set out the question of meaning in times of apocalypse. What actually is going on? How do you respond to this? Well, it's saying apocalypse for Shelley is not to say what's the meaning of apocalypse. It's the only meaning that actually makes sense is what should be left to move forward after apocalypse, because you can't assume anyone will be around from the old civilization to read it. What do you think a new civilization want to be? Emil says, me and Luminance are on the streets of Manhattan interviewing random passerbys, asking them existential questions and live streaming it. Could, possibly, yeah. This is Mary Shelley. Apparently she wrote other books besides Frankenstein, and this one is this kind of this apocalyptic story, Luminance. So yeah. This is Mary Shelley, not Percy. Yeah, so apparently Percy died, and Mary was depressed, and so this is like the last man. Like, she was like, what do you do in apocalyptic times? But yeah, everyone get your ratings if you want to. Of course you don't have to, but yeah, I'd appreciate it if you do. But yeah, this was, it was a response to like some critics, but it gave like, a feeling of what was going on in the book. He drowned on a stupid boat trip. Yeah, I mean, she was talking about that and how he was a bitch. She was really depressed, suicidal, and trying to make sense of how you move on or how you live when everything you've lost all sort of things. So I was trying to say like it's kind of Sisyphusian. What do you do when like you've lost your old life and you're just doing stuff you don't care about, whatever it was. Thanks, K-Pars, appreciate it for the scream and a dance, brain dance. But like, yeah, what do you do? And then apparently, like, there's other stuff she wrote that, like, never been published. It's just around. Maybe it's not great, maybe it is, but like, sometimes this stuff at least deserves to be available in a PDF somewhere. Okay, anyone else wants to get in? One more minute and you can get yourselves in, and then we'll go give a raid and see if we can go find someone to raid. What time is it? It's 10:23 in the evening. We'll find something to do. Somewhere to drop you off. But yeah, this wasn't bad. I mean, it's kind of interesting stuff. And this is why I like philosophy and literature. You're getting a different... It's not like purely analytic. It's not purely continental. You're getting this from the literary perspective, talking about philosophical ideas and how they're engaged with in this literary way. And so it does remind me of, again, this is in the political science. This is a political scientist talking about a literary book. And so you're getting different perspectives on the philosophy, not necessarily in the sort of like straight analytic, straight continental. It's a different history here. You're drawing on different sort of texts and different desires about what to talk about. So again, we talked about like plagues and stuff and technology and who actually is the cause of the plague. It isn't the disease. It's sort of the incompetence and society of people getting into fights and not organizing and doing stuff like that. And that's what causes pandemics. It's not usually just the disease on its own. You need the human technological infrastructure to undergird the worldwide pandemic. It does not happen otherwise.